Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your marriage without your man's conscious effort so you feel desired, taken care of, and special, even if your relationship feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today I'm revealing how to be optimistic about your marriage. My guest Lorelai thought everything was perfect in her marriage except when it came to the bedroom, where it felt like an anxiety inducing disaster. Finally, she got fed up and gave her husband a timeline of 3 months to shape up or else they'd get divorced. But today, her marriage is absolutely wonderful. She's going to describe how she did it so you can do it too. The worst relationship advice of the week award is from an article on a popular website called 10 Signs That You're Not in Love with Your Partner Anymore. And there are 10 signs that this is some pretty bad relationship advice. All of that is coming up, but first I'm going to reveal how to be optimistic about your marriage. If you're asking yourself if there's hope for your marriage, it means you're going through a lot of heartache. After all, no one asks that about a marriage that's full of hand-holding and sweet nothings. That question only comes up when you're incredibly hurt and angry, and you've been feeling that way for a long time. And even though it was long ago, I still remember feeling that way, and it was awful. I remember thinking there was no way things were going to improve, and it was completely hopeless because he was not going to change. So to say I was not optimistic is an understatement. Of course, I was wrong. Things could have improved, and they did, beyond my wildest dreams. And wouldn't you know it? I was the one who had the power all along, just like Dorothy. But what about your situation? Is there hope for your marriage? Well, here are 4 questions to help you definitively know. Number 1, are you a wife? If you answered yes to this question, I have great news. Hope just scored a point. So far, there's every reason to be optimistic that your marriage can not only be saved, it can become vibrant and happy again. That's because women are the keepers of the relationship. We're the ones with all the power to make it playful and passionate, or else tense and distant. I wouldn't have believed it myself, but I've experienced it, and I've seen it with thousands of other women. Now, for the first 7 years of my marriage, I chose to be tense and distant because I didn't know any better. And then, once I learned a thing or two about a thing or two, I started choosing to be playful and passionate all the time. And that's how it's been for over 20 years now. I mean, who wouldn't set her marriage to the awesome setting if she had the choice, right? I had no idea where the switch was or that there was such a switch. And that was demoralizing. And I know this may sound crazy, but you also control that switch because you're a woman. That's true even if your relationship is in crisis, like a separation or an affair or a pending divorce. You're more powerful than you might realize. And so far, based on question number 1, there's hope for your marriage to be amazing. So let's move on to the next question. Number 2, do you often try to help your husband? If you would describe yourself as being very helpful, it's such good news because that means you've just found a major source of conflict and exhaustion in your marriage, which you have all the power to eliminate. If you're anything like me, you may not realize that your helpfulness comes off as control. It comes off as disrespect, which hurts the good vibes at your house. I didn't realize I was doing major damage to our connection and our romance, and therefore to my optimism about the future of my marriage. But I was by being helpful. And it was heartbreaking because it made my husband seem like the biggest jerk and the worst loser pants and the least caring husband on the planet, which convinced me even more that I had to control everything. So that's how helpfulness comes off to your husband. It comes off as control. So if you answered yes to question number 2, there is so much hope for your marriage. Number 3, have you gotten your hands on the 6 intimacy skills yet? Even after I realized that I was contributing to the problem in my relationship, which was shocking, I couldn't stop wrecking the intimacy between us at first. I just didn't know how. Eventually, I figured out a system that helped me stop micromanaging and controlling and complaining and criticizing and nagging. And if you decide you want to save your marriage, you can stop those unpleasant habits too. The 6 intimacy skills will help you naturally attract your man's time, attention, and affection. And a great fringe benefit of practicing them is that I like myself a lot better now that I don't screech with hostility or repeat myself endlessly trying to get what I need. There's just no reason to do that. Since no one had ever showed me an alternative to screeching and nagging before, I did what I saw dear old mom doing, and she got divorced. Oof. I never even realized that there were intimacy skills or that I needed to know them to have a good relationship. I thought that I would just know how to have a good marriage. But it wouldn't be your fault if you couldn't make a good omelet if no one had ever shown you how, right? I mean, if no one ever taught you the intimacy skills, then there's a big bright light at the end of the tunnel now that you've found them. In other words, there's a world of hope for your situation. Number 4, have you been mentally preparing for the end of your marriage, just in case it comes to that? If this question is a yes for you, I can sure relate. It's another hidden reason that your marriage feels so hard right now. For years, I was on the verge of bolting from my marriage because I thought that's how I could stay safe. It wasn't. I was just making it impossible for a marriage to be peaceful and for it to be connected. And I just didn't know any better. I thought I should take precautions and plan for the worst. Now I could see how much harm that did. It made us both defensive because there was always the threat of a divorce hanging over us. Nobody is at their best when they're scared and defensive. So one huge improvement to the prospects for my marriage was deciding to go all in. Finally, when that threat of splitting was gone, we could both relax and breathe and even laugh together. You probably didn't realize that thinking about hitting the eject button was causing so much heartache in your marriage, but it definitely did in mine. It's terrifying to know that your spouse might leave you, and if you're the one who is afraid of getting left, well, you know just what I'm talking about. Even if your husband is the one who's got you scared that your marriage is ending and you answered yes to the questions above, then there is so much hope for your marriage. I know that what I'm saying could be hard to believe. Maybe there are special circumstances that you worry would make your relationship hopeless, that your situation includes a deal breaker. I get it. What can I possibly know about your situation? I don't. You are the expert on your own life. But with all the time and energy and heart you've already invested in your relationship, I hate to see you give up 5 minutes before your miracle. Instead, consider experimenting with the 6 intimacy skills and making your marriage a glorious success. And then come and celebrate with me by being a guest on the podcast and sharing how you became optimistic about your marriage. If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. My guest Lorelai thought everything was perfect in her marriage, except when it came to the bedroom, where it felt like an anxiety inducing disaster for a long time. Finally, she got fed up and she gave him a timeline of 3 months or it would be a divorce. Then she made some changes and he responded so positively, she genuinely didn't believe it was real. She was almost mad about it. And instead of being divorced today, she says her marriage is absolutely wonderful. She's going to describe what she did so you can do it too. Lorelai, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. Thank you so much.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for having me. I'm tickled to be here.
Awesome. Well, tell us about the bad old days. I want to hear the whole thing.
Yeah, well, actually, I want to bring you all the way back to the good old days because it really informs how we got to the bad old days. And because it started out, we had met in high school, and if you ask him, we met in middle school because apparently we had a class together, and I don't remember, but we're here. And we didn't start dating until after high school, but it was so clear he just was smitten with me from the beginning. And I was really reluctant because I knew in my heart once I started dating him that would be it, that I knew he was going to be the one. And I really wanted to sow some wild oats. And I was like, college is that time to start exploring, and I wasn't ready. And then we had a late night one night, and he kissed me, and it was just absolute literal fireworks. I shouldn't say literal, but it was fireworks. And I knew it. And so I couldn't say no anymore. I would just said, let's do this. And here we are. So all things were good. And then we got to stuff in the bedroom, like you said, and it just was always from the beginning had been a little rocky. Like we had that new love excitement, but it just never, I don't think we ever solidified because we were each other's first and new experiences. And we were just bumbling and young and we didn't know a lot about what we were doing. So it was easy to kind of, what happened is I ended up really kind of losing myself. I spent a lot of time reading Cosmo and doing like, this is what I should be doing to make him happy. And I had no idea that I should be happy as well. So it was really hard, and it just started to tank from there. And then he ended up having to move up away, about 4 hours away. So we were apart for about 2 years. We were doing long distance, and that just made everything so much harder because then you're just kind of scheduling it. So it was like we would see each other every 2 weekends, and we knew it's like that's the time we're going to do it. So the pressure was on, and if it didn't go well, then it was awful, and it really planted a lot of doubts in my mind that we were actually a good fit because I kept thinking, oh my gosh, we were so young. Like you said in your book, married young, and maybe this wasn't the right choice. And I just started to really hear these doubts coming in, and there were, things that were saying like maybe there's somebody else out there who's better for you, who would be a better fit in the bedroom, like just who would be able to do all you needed. Because at that time I was expecting him to be everything and more.
Mhm.
And he couldn't live up to it because I didn't know what I couldn't express any of my desires. And it got so bad that it was exactly like this anxiety inducing, and for both of us, and it was awful. And it was a constant routine where we would give it a try and like kind of like bolster ourselves, like, okay, we've got this, let's try it. And then it would go poorly, and he wouldn't be able to finish. And so I would read that as, you don't find me attractive and you're not interested, and all these things. And I would keep telling him this, like, you're just so not engaged, and I can't believe you're not here and really connecting with me over this. This is so important. And the other thing is that he is a very gentle human. I love this man. He's so kind. And what I wanted in a bedroom setting wasn't I wanted like power and like raw magnetism, and that's not him. So I was just, and so it just got worse. It just kept saying like, there's, I'm sure there's somebody else out there who would be better for me. And it was especially confusing because everything else, he was so wonderful. We fit together so well. And I couldn't imagine why this piece didn't work, why we just couldn't make this piece work. And I tried over and over to everything, and we would do a reset, like, okay, well, let's pretend we're just dating and we'll like go through the bases, and this week we'll do this base, and and it just, nothing worked because that stress was always there, and I was always just kind of, and here's the thing is he spotted it way ahead of me, because he would say like, I can't do this, you keep coming into this like ready to be angry, and you're like this prickly porcupine, and he's like, I can't work with this. And I would go like, it's not my issue, this is your issue, you have problems, I'm always excited to have sex, and you're the one who's being scared. And so yeah, so then we would go through, we'd give it an attempt, he would not finish, and I would just rage endlessly, like, how can you ruin our marriage this way? Why are you not able to be here present? Why don't you like sex the way I like sex? And it was awful,
Mm,
awful.
it sounds awful, so
Yeah.
painful. And then I know I had terrible hangovers from my raging, so you
Yeah.
probably had some terrible hangovers from that as well.
Oh yes.
Hmm,
Yeah.
awful. Yeah. And then, and you had like a diagnosis for him.
Yes. So it went like this. So we had gone through first round of counseling pre-pandemic. And because I had said like, well, it's clearly your issue, so let's go get this looked at. And the counselor was pleasant. I really applaud her. She tried, and and we talked about his childhood, we talked about my childhood, and it was all the things, right?
I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't
No,
laugh.
but I know it's fair.
Okay, yeah.
We know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she did try to kind of try and get me to take some responsibility, and I bristled really hard at it. It
Mhm.
wasn't, I don't think she had the tools to do that, because we would walk out and she was like, well, why don't, if things go wrong, why don't you kind of like not rage at him, essentially? And I was like, how am I supposed to do that? That's, how dare you?
Right, right.
So it was, and she tried. So we did that. And then of course, then we're walking around with this like, well, it's your childhood. That's the problem. So
Oh,
it's pretty unfixable.
my God. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So then we go around, and I had diagnosed him. So we left her, and because we had kind of stagnated, and then
yeah.
there's only so much childhood you can talk about. And then we move forward, and it's just the two of us then. And I was online, and I was super desperate at this point because ours had hit just rock bottom, and I didn't want to get a divorce because, like you, I was so embarrassed to do so. And I said, okay, I'm going to try and hold up face for a little bit longer. And so yeah, I diagnosed him with, which is so embarrassing, it's called intimacy anorexia.
Mm.
And I mean, and the thing was, all of the words I was reading, I was like, yes, that's him, that's exactly what he has. Like, certainly not my issue, it's definitely his.
Yeah.
And and so there was a whole workbook series, there were his and her workbooks, and like the workbook I had was literally titled "He Needs to Change." So
Oh,
I was like, oh good, that's not my problem.
my work here's done.
Yes, I've gotten I
I can continue to be the perfect wife that I
yes,
have been all along. Okay.
exactly. He's like, okay, good, good. And I mean, oh my goodness, bless him. Because he worked so hard to try and do anything to make this work. He was so willing. He bought these books and they were not cheap. And I was like, good, you're gonna pay for them. And I was so angry. Um, but there was one book, and this is what really kind of made me go, oh no, what is this? Because we had these daily exercises and they took up an hour of our time, and I think we both hated them,
Mm.
where we're supposed to share feelings and connect back to childhood. And I was like, okay. And nothing really changed. It just, made me angrier, because it just said, these are the things that he's doing wrong. And I said, yes, these are the
Yes.
things he's doing
Right.
wrong.
Yes.
And so and what really kind of stopped me, though, is I was reading a book kind of like yours, where you have all the coaches talking about their own experiences. Except this was the book for the spouses, and I was reading through, and it's talking about, all these interview questions, and I'm going like, yes, oh yeah, that's me too. And I got to the final question was like, how's your relationship now? And I'm expecting like, oh, okay. And I think there were like 8 people they had interviewed, and one of them had a happy ending, and the rest of them were like divorce, separation, this. And I said, well, why am I doing this? Yeah, I couldn't figure out why I was doing this then. Like, you have a 1 in 8 success rate. What is this? And that's where I thought, oh, maybe this wasn't right either. So, but that book actually did a lot of damage, because it just put a lot of the onus on him, and he just walked around feeling terrible, because it was just me going, you're not doing well. This is all your fault. And here are the ways that you're ruining everything. It
Mm.
was bad.
Awful. And then the hopelessness on your end
Yes.
too,
Yeah.
right? Like,
And this was the last resort for us, because I really had hit rock bottom. And then, I was at that timeline of, you have 3 months to change my mind, and then I really will proceed forward with divorce, because I didn't want to be in a sexless marriage. And I would tell him that often, like, I refuse to do this. And this isn't the life I want. And everything, forever and ever and ever was
yeah,
running through my
let's not
head of
forget ever.
ever.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was just saying, I won't do this forever and ever. And that's what it looked like to me. And I said, life is so short. I don't want to be in the sexless marriage. So yeah, we were in the middle of this book series, and I said, like, you keep working at it. And at some point, I was kind of off his paper a little bit, forcing him to do all this other stuff. And we were talking, and I was like, well, how are the exercises going? And he said, I've stopped doing them. And I felt that moment, my heart just broke down the center. And I was like, well, if you're not going to work on this is all I have. I guess we're done. And I
He's
just,
giving up.
yeah,
He's not willing to try.
yeah,
So
exactly.
that proves this is hopeless.
Yes. And I really, and from there on out, I was just a numb shell of a human. I walked around, and I didn't care if he, because he's a runner, so he'll go out and run. And back in the day, I'd be like, oh, let me know when you're done, so I can, like, I know you're in one piece, and all this. And then after that point, it was just like, if you don't come back, I guess you don't come back. And I mean, I was just dead inside. It just killed me flat
Wow.
out.
Yeah, a lot of
It was
heartbreak
awful.
there.
Yeah.
Awful, awful. So you were starting to grieve the loss of your marriage.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it was so hard. And I couldn't tell anyone, because my family, it just, my family wouldn't have been happy with anyone I picked. So, oh, nobody.
No, no, there's not, no, not a
Not a
human
single
on the
one.
planet, huh?
No,
Okay,
nobody was
not one. All right.
acceptable. So I couldn't go to them and share. And there was only one person that I have, my best friend, and I felt comfortable sharing with her. So she was the only one who knew what was happening. And so it was just really hard. I didn't have a big support system, and I was just going to her going, I don't know what to do. And she's a good friend of my husband's too. So it was like, we're this little tripod. And I just thought, I don't know what we're going to do after this. it was terrible.
It sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And one of the things it sound like, I mean, this is why the books, the other program was so
Mhm.
seductive in a way, because at least you weren't alone, right? At
Yeah.
least there was other people that had your problem and they could describe it in great detail and it
Mhm.
matched your experience. So now it's like, oh, we're not the only ones. And that feels
Yeah.
really good. So that's, yeah, I get it's the counterfeit, unfortunately, because that
Yeah.
was just describing the problem, which is not the same as
Yes.
solving it. But
No.
okay, and so and then the rest of your marriage is really pretty good at this, or not at this point, maybe.
No, at this point, no. I hated everything. I was so
Okay.
mad, and I couldn't stop finding fault with him. He couldn't do anything right, and it was just everything added up. And I would say, because in my head it was like, well, the floors need swept and the trash, like, why aren't you doing any of these things automatically? I had never mentioned that I wanted them, but you
Yeah, he should
know,
just know.
he should
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
know.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously, this is how you
Yeah.
run a house.
Yeah.
And so everything just started adding up. And then I would start raging about other things like, you don't do any of these things. And I feel like I'm raising a child and I didn't want to marry a child. I didn't want to have kids. So I certainly don't want to be married to one. And then everything was just falling apart. And I mean, I'm so fortunate that he fought for us. He was, I mean, I just can't can't be grateful enough, because really, if he had had any less gumption or grit, I mean, I know we'd be separated, but he really did know. And I mean, it was so confusing because I knew that he was still my person, but I couldn't square anything. And I was just mad all the time, and just everything he did, I found fault with everything. He couldn't do anything right. Yeah.
It sounds awful.
Yeah.
So what happened?
So what happened was we were we were in just like one of those. So we had done a lot of kind of a sine wave, like little up, down, up, down, up, down. And we were in one of those tiny ups where I was like, maybe. And I was online Googling, and I was actually happy for the briefest of moments. And I like typed in, I want to hug my husband. Why? I don't. I mean, like, I did want to hug him, but why that I would Google that, because I don't know what I was expecting to come back. But that's what I Googled. And out popped one of your it must have been the blog. And I'm reading through, and you're talking about, this is the negative that we're dealing with, and here's how to make it a positive. And I was like, okay. And I couldn't tell you what one it was in particular. But what got me were the comments, because that's exactly where I went, like, well, people, because if the first time you read anything, I think it comes off a little like, okay, maybe not, because it feels so out of the norm. It feels so unconventional, almost, at least from what I had thought was
Oh yeah.
the
Oh
conventional
yeah.
way to be married.
Yes.
So I go down to the comments, and people are ragging on you, like, oh, well, aren't you just a Pollyanna? Just everything's good. I'm sure things will work out. And I was like, yeah, that's how I felt too. Yeah. But it was you, and you had responded, and everything you said was just a little glimmer of hope every single time. Like, nothing got in your way, and you were just like, no, I believe in you, and this is possible. And it was I was so intrigued, like, how could this human believe so strongly in this, when we all know marriage is hard, and we all know divorce is so high. There's no way. So I went and I found your book. I went and found, well, I was looking for First Kill All the Marriage Counselors, not realizing the name had changed. So my best friend who I was working, I was like, we've got to find this book. And she's like, I can only find Empowered Wife, Surrendered Wife. I was like, no, it's called First Kill All the Marriage Counselors. You've got to get this one. So she did. We found it at a used bookstore, and I was like, great. still very skeptical, and still hurting so much because sex was still terrible, and it just still very dead inside, still hurting. And I really felt like that. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's called The Cutting Edge, that like 90s movie, and they're ice skating and they're practicing this move, and it requires her to be thrown, and she keeps being thrown to the ice, and just beaten down. And that scene was very much all I could think about in our marriage. Is I just felt like her. Like, he doesn't really do anything. He doesn't suffer. She's just being tossed and tossed. And I thought, like, that's me. Um, but anywho, so I got the book and I started reading it. Did the quiz where you said marriage can be a safe place to land, and I said, okay, and just kept going through it. And I am like an A+ child. I do everything by the book. So the first skill I started was the self-care, because that's the first skill in the book. And to be totally honest with you, Laura, I did it out of pure spite. Just
I'll show her.
I was
This is so stupid.
yeah. And I was like, she doesn't understand. She doesn't realize how bad my marriage is.
Yeah.
There's no way this is going to work for me. And I was so excited to prove you wrong, to go through your book, do everything, and come out no better, and just be like, well, showed you, lady.
Yeah. And I would never know, but you would know that I was wrong.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So somehow I would win that way as well.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I see why we get along so well.
Right.
Relate to you.
Yeah. I know. And I just was like, and as everybody says, like, I just saw myself. But at first I was like, no way, no way. So I was like, okay. And at this point, I can't remember if we had tried to have sex recently or what, but I was back to angry. I was no longer in that like little happy. It was back to just
No longer wanting to hug your husband.
no longer want. No, not at all.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And the first thing, because you had suggested make a list of things that make you happy and a list of things that you want. And I was like, okay, fine. And I'm grumbling on my phone, like, I'm doing my homework. Here I am. And I finished. I finished the list, and I was lighter for it, and I was happy suddenly. And it was so small, and all it took was 2 minutes of my time to write this out. And suddenly I said, oh no, there's another
He's
emotion.
winning.
Rats. So it just, I said, oh no. And off I went. So I went out and did my first round of self-care, which is go out to the park and do some sketching. And I'm an awful artist, just terrible. But I was like, I like doing it despite being bad at it. And so I went out, and then I do remember, because my husband and I had fought, and I couldn't, so many fights, I couldn't tell you what it was about this time, but I know that I had left, and he doesn't get angry. He gets sad, and he gets very withdrawn. And like, I would always talk about him like, you're just always a kicked puppy, like, stand up for yourself and do this, as I'm like yelling in his face.
Yeah.
Like,
Right. What's wrong with you?
Right.
You're stand up for yourself.
Really easy. Yeah. So I went out, and what was probably a huff, because I was really good at passive aggression. So, I was like, well, I'm going out to do my self-care, and I hope he's, whatever. I hope he's feeling bad and everything. And I went out, came back just lighter again and feeling happy. And he was super tentative. I walked in, and he was like, hey, how are you? And I was like, I'm actually really good. And he was like, are you really? Because because we were in the middle of our fight, and fights for me, and well, for him too, but they could last days of just me being angry and poor him, just no idea what to do, is there was nothing that would calm me. There was nothing that could put out that rage.
Mm.
And so he was very much like, I thought you were really mad at me. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm okay. I'm actually okay. And it was the first step to a very, very positive experience as we moved
Wow.
along.
Oh, I love that. I love that you were such a good student and you had to do the homework. You had to
Yeah.
do it. Yeah. So and you were noticing like, okay, it's actually that feels better than being angry for
Mhm.
several days.
Yes.
And he was noticing, it sounds like
Mhm.
too.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, I love it. Okay, so this was a little glimmer. So now
Mhm.
you maybe have some hope, but this is still not really touching
Y
the
Yes.
major pain point that you have, right? Okay.
Yeah. And there was definitely a little bit of hope, like, "Oh, no, I think she might be onto something." And so off I went like a good student, like doing my workbook. And I think the next one is maybe receiving, and I can't remember the order anymore. But yeah, and I said, "Oh man, I have been a terrible receiver and an awful receiver." And I thought, okay, well, this one's easy enough to do because all I have to do is say yes to things when he offers. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. So that was my next skill, and he did, and I just didn't realize how much he had offered when we were first dating and when we were first together, how much he'd offered that I would, brush off like, no, I've got it. Cause I found myself, I thought I was super empowered and just this model of strength, like, okay, I've got it. And I didn't realize how much I had just tromped all over him and his ability to be helpful and wonderful and supportive. And I just stepped all over it. So I did receiving next, and it was fun. It was actually just fun to to just say yes, and maybe a little uncomfortable because it's like, am I worthy of this? Do I deserve to have him go bring me dinner while I sit here? And it was just like, okay, well, she says to do it, and the self-care went okay, so might as well try it. And that was good too. And we kept moving along, and I'm trying to think, because yeah, the linchpin was still sex. We'd still That was still suffering, or hadn't been fixed, I should say it that way. It just we were still trying, and it was still tentative, and there was still a lot of that. It was just, and it was me just waiting for him to mess up. And that's what he had said when we were first arguing over it. Like, I just feel like you're just waiting for me to mess up. You're waiting for me to
Disappoint
prove
you.
myself. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And I was like, nah, that's not what's happening. And it was exactly what was happening. I just didn't have
Oh.
the the foresight to
Oh.
realize.
Yeah, you're so
Um,
accountable now though. It's really that's
yes.
impressive. Very impressive.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, so we kept on, and things really did go a lot better. And with the smallest things, it really was exactly what you said in the intro. Is just, I could not believe how easy this was now, that it just had all become so much easier. And then we got into physical intimacy. And the thing was, in the book, you have a thing of like just being available for him. And for me, that wasn't my problem. Like, he would never initiate, and I was like, okay, well, now I don't know what to do. But I was on the Facebook feed, and I think it had come up, and people were like, no, no, like, give it a try, like, just stick with the skills. And I was like, but none of these skills address sex. Like, none of them are directly related. Like, okay, are we sure there isn't something else I should be doing? But everything else had gone well, so I said, okay, why not? And we I can't remember how long into the skills, and I still hadn't done all of them. It was still bits and pieces of it, but we had just it was back to fireworks again the first time after starting the skills. I know.
What? Wait, what?
I know. It's like,
What just
what
happened?
is that? Yeah. And it was it was better than like our first time, better than anything we'd done before. And I couldn't believe it because it just felt like this was the missing piece. And this is the relationship in full, in whole. It just felt like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what it was supposed to be all along. And I couldn't believe it.
Okay, so let's dissect that a little bit
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's sort of like you like to sketch, right? I hate it
Yes.
when they show you like first draw a circle and then
Yeah.
then the final and then it's like
Then you've
it's
got
the
an
Mona Lisa
out.
and you're like, wait, what just happened there? So
Right.
okay, so what did you do differently? How do you
Yeah.
think you showed up differently or what happened
Yeah.
to make
Well,
that happen?
for me, it was definitely a lot of receiving. The gratitude I was slow at. And I didn't want to make the gratitude list because I thought, just he's supposed to be doing this anyways. Why would I thank him for it?
Yeah.
And that one was very, very sluggish for me, but I did do it, and it went over well. Apologies for disrespect were, oh man, it was gravel in my mouth. I
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was really hard because he's like we said, like he's not a man's man. He's just like gentle and kind and all the things that I wanted. Like I didn't want somebody big and ragey, and he's so sweet. But it was really hard for us. It was hard for me, especially, to do the respect piece, because when I would say, like, I apologize for being disrespectful, it turned my stomach a little bit. And I think he was super confused. He didn't quite know what to do with it. Like, wait, because I think for both of us, our perception of that statement was very like 1940s housewife. Like, I'm sitting here like, oh, I apologize, and he's like, that's not me. Like, I strive very hard not to be that chauvinistic, male. And he's like, I don't need that. And I was like, no, but I think we need to look at what respect means for us. And it doesn't mean that you're the authority figure and I'm not. It means that I consider you equal and worthy of my attention, love, and kindness. And that was a big one for us. And I had to talk it out with my best friend, like, this respect thing, like, help me work this out. And she's like, no, I don't see respect as authority figure. I see it as just this evenness, that you're a worthwhile human. And I said, oh, that way. Okay, now I get it.
Ah, I like this. So you had to kind of redefine it for yourself
Yeah.
because you were thinking of it in terms of like you have to respect your parents or your
Yeah.
boss or
Yes.
some authority figure.
Yeah.
And that felt yucky, which it
Super.
would. It would, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, my husband's in charge now?
Yes.
That doesn't sound right. And so when you redefined it as, yeah, him being worthy of your love and kindness.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I think of it as that your trust too, I guess,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it resonated.
Much better. And I felt much more comfortable saying it. And I think it's still, even now, I think he's still getting used to apologies like that. Because it's just, I didn't know how to apologize. And that was really a problem for me, for us, because I would get into these rage modes and I just didn't know how to get out of them, because I couldn't accept apologies. What I wanted was for him to just come groveling. And even when he groveled, it wasn't enough.
Oh, you got kind of repulsive in a way, probably, right?
Yeah,
When you
yeah.
were
It
like,
was just like, well, yeah. Then, yeah. So then I was saying, like, well, stand up and fight back. And he's like, I don't want to. And
yeah, there
yeah,
was
and
no
I
exit.
nothing.
Yeah, there's no way to
Ugh,
get out.
absolutely no way.
And apologizing, I'd loved you had said it. I found out it wasn't a death sentence. So it felt like it
Yes.
was gonna be a death sentence, it
Yes.
sounds like before.
Ugh.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't. It wasn't. So you
No.
apologized and it doesn't sound like you got wasn't an amazing like, "Oh,
Mm-mm.
aha," response. So
No.
why did you stick with the apologies or what?
It yeah, it's a good question. It felt good. It felt so nice to be kind, to have this exit out of these rage modes. And suddenly it was like, oh, if I just clean my side of the street up, I can move along with my day, and we can move along with our day. And we don't have to make this a big deal. And suddenly it just wasn't a big deal. And that to me was worth so much. I got so much of my time back to just be able to apologize. And then he would apologize and I would accept it. I would receive it, and we'd be on our way. And it was just
Wow.
so much
Wow.
better.
No longer in exile, in
No,
ragey Cold War exile.
no, no.
Yeah. It's a big
Yeah.
day when that happens. That's a great thing. And
Yeah.
then you had mentioned earlier, someone said, well, how about if you don't rage after this happens or whatever?
Yeah.
And you were like, what? So it sounds like, I mean, I know for me, I didn't know how to not rage. I didn't have that ability
Hmm.
to not rage. So it sounds like, I'm guessing you probably didn't either. Is that right?
No, I had no model for it in my childhood, because it was very much like my mother. An apology was seen as forfeit, as losing the war. So I had no idea how, because I like to win. So I didn't
Yes.
want to lose.
Yes, me too.
Yes.
Yeah, very important to win.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
Okay,
very
so
hard.
all right, so you were doing this apologizing, you were receiving his apologies.
Hmm.
You were still doing the self-care, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Yeah.
Hmm.
And and the and what anything else? What else were you
Yeah. So
gratitude you mentioned too.
yeah,
Yeah.
it started
What
in on
else?
gratitude. And then what happened was, because there's like a small dip here, and I just want to mention it because we had talked about in one of the group coaching calls. It was like the 3-month dip, and I just want to talk, because that's where I did have another big breakthrough for me, because I like, we saw those instant results and I was like so excited and fired up, and then kind of, I don't want to hit it didn't hit a wall. It just kind of, I saw the problem start to come back, and I really started to panic, and that fear came in very hard. So, so how did it go? Because I also want to talk about spouse fulfilling prophecies and just having such success with it.
Oh,
Um,
we're gonna hear about that.
okay.
We're gonna talk about that. I won't
Oh,
forget.
good, because I don't
Okay.
want to forget it. It was one of my
Okay.
favorite moments. But yeah, so it was like 3 months in, almost to the letter, and I just I just saw the fissure start to come back, and I was like, what is happening? Because this was the first time we had gone through three therapists, the one workbook, and it was, it just like all over the place, and it tried so much. And then like some home remedies of like, let's start over from zero. And this was the first time where I really felt like I have skills, I have a plan, I have things to actually do, instead of this very theoretical, like, well, do this and that. And
Be
and
more
this was,
loving. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
more open.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So and I was very worried, like this really felt like the right thing, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. Like, why was I failing? And I had such a big regression back. We were in the middle of trying to start up some PI, and I think he was struggling, and because there used to be a lot of pressure, and it's hard to kind of immediately clear that out. So, and I had done a
Mhm.
lot of damage in terms of just setting the bar like this, and the pressure so impossible. So I knew he was struggling, and I I had two options, and I could almost hear your voice in my head, like, this is what you should say right now. And and I said, no, like, I'm gonna try this other way and be super angry again. Why? I don't know.
Well, just
Um
yeah, fun.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's really that, like, I'm a mathematician. This is my profession. So
Oh,
I had to experiment a little bit, which was really a bad idea.
oh,
And
good idea.
but
Experiments pay
well,
off, right?
that's true. That's
I have
true.
a
I didn't
feeling I'm hearing this story because there was a good dividend.
eventually, yes. So I completely ignored what I should have said, and I dove right into angry rage Lorelai again. And I was like, okay, and like just let loose. Like, I can't believe this. I've been working all this, doing this program for 3 months, and now we're right here again. And just that was it. And it just put us right back in the slump. And I really had to talk with myself, like, what do I want? And how do I want to be, and what kind of marriage do I still want this marriage? So I went all the way back to the beginning, like, maybe I don't want to stay married, maybe there's somebody else where this wouldn't be a problem. And all full regression back. And it was a moment of me really looking at what's happening, like, why did this happen, and why did I choose to not go the Laura Doyle route? Why did I choose to go rogue and go back? Like, what was happening? And it was because I did a full meditation with myself, just really trying to get into what was happening.
Mhm.
And it was a moment of me realizing there were a lot of things that I was doing just because like I said, I'm that gold star student. I really wanted a star from you, Laura. I was like, yeah, I want to have this marriage so that Laura will say I did a good job. Completely missing the point that I want a marriage because I like it, because it's good for me. So I'd spent so much time trying to like fit myself into the 6 skills instead of like having them fit with me. So I really had to look at, what does this look like for me? Not what Laura would give me a star for, but like, what do I want? What does my self-care look like for me? And what does gratitude look like for me? And how do I work this into my daily life to make it an actual change, an actual habit? And that was a really big moment for me, because I realized I hadn't been doing that I was just looking for approval, outside approval, and it didn't matter. It matters what I think and how I show up. And then the other thing I realized was I had really locked my heart away. We had dealt with a lot of tragedies. My sister had been diagnosed with cancer just pre-pandemic. Then we hit pandemic, and we lost my father-in-law to COVID. And it was, and along with my marriage just falling. So there were a lot of opportunities for me to really guard my heart very strongly and heavily, because I had nearly lost my sister, and I had lost my father-in-law, and just it felt like there was no safe opportunity to reach out to somebody, and especially my husband, because I was feeling so beat down. And so every time we reached out for and sex didn't work out, it felt like just another hit to me. And so just wall on wall. And I
Mhm.
said to myself, this meditation, saying like, look, Lorelai, you can't do this. This is not the way to live. It's not the marriage you want. And you may get hurt, but you cannot go on this way. You can't be so guarded. You can't be so shielded. And
Wow.
it was that last piece for me, was vulnerability, was the last skill that just opened everything up. And I said, oh my goodness, there's so much more. And like, I walked out, and it was like colors were brighter, flowers were blooming. And because I had thought I was a vulnerable human, like I cry at sad puppy videos, and I like I like Pixar films,
Yeah.
and I just didn't realize that I had not opened my heart all the way up to my husband. Like, I was saying all the words, but nothing was getting surface level, or past the surface level. It just was all sitting there. Like, I was saying thank you, and I was saying, I love you. And I knew they were words that I meant, but I couldn't actually feel them deep in. And that last step, that vulnerable part, was just so critical to really making this the marriage that it is now, and just the amazing part that it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you had this conversation with yourself. This is a remarkable conversation where
Yeah.
you really were making the decision. I want to have the kind of marriage where, yeah, I could get hurt, but I'm also going to
Mhm.
be able to feel loved really deeply. And
Yeah.
and that's an equation as a mathematician that you
Yes.
were like, okay, that one makes sense. It adds up for
Yes.
okay. And I mean, and it was from a meditation. You kind of did a
Hmm.
meditation, and
Yeah.
then you really came out of it with this softness, this openness you're describing. It's really, I guess I just want to spend a minute there because
Hmm.
it feels very challenging sometimes. It has for me. How do I
Yeah.
get to this vulnerability? How do
Yeah.
I want it. I want to experience that remarkable feeling.
Hmm.
But how do I get there? And so I don't know. Can you say a little more about how you got yourself there?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to describe, but like for me, when I'm meditating, it's really just watching my mind and where it goes. And it does a good job of leading me where I need to be. It seems to know exactly what I need. And, and I, yeah, like I said, it's hard to describe, but it was just a moment of coming in and saying, like, these are all the things, and it just kind of brings up all those things, all those traumas that I had suffered, and just kind of bringing them up, like, what are these doing and how have they colored you, and then kind of me making that connection of, oh, this is what's happened, this is why I'm so afraid here. And it was running through that waterfall of fear, and just really being ready to open up and live honestly and fully open, knowing that, and that was the scary part, is knowing that if anything happens to him, if I lose him, that it will hurt so much, but in the meantime, this life now is so important to me to live it very, very open, very real with him, and be that connected.
Mm.
And I definitely, I think we talk about this, you talk about it in the book, of being at work, and you're very, in this masculine energy and stuff like that. And I do catch myself, especially after a long week, like, I've been on these deadlines and doing all these things, and that masculine part really starts to bring up those walls of just like, you got to do the task and be on it. And I can feel when it starts to come back up, and I will actively tell myself, like, no, you have to put this down. It's the end, like, it's not time, and your marriage is not where you need to be, that strong masculine piece. Your marriage is the spot where you can open up and be kind and soft and vulnerable.
Mm. So you have a lot of awareness about which mode you are in, and you're able to change your hat, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel super grateful for that. It's for me, like, meditation has been such a big part of really tuning into what field I'm in. And that's been so, so helpful.
Yeah. I love that.
Mhm.
That sounds like a superpower. Sounds like it feels like a superpower
Oh
to
yeah.
be able to change. Yeah, I love it. So, all right, now tell us about spouse fulfilling prophecies,
Yes.
SFPs.
And so my favorite use of it was for sex, because that was where we had struggled the most. And I had been filled with a lot of negative ones of, like, he's not manly enough, he's not whatever, he doesn't desire sex like you do. And this was like when we had first started reading the book. And so we did, like, I was reading the book and he was just there.
Did he know about the book?
He did, he did.
Okay.
And because we're so open, and I was so skeptical about it, like, oh, let's try, I'm gonna try this, and whatever happens, happens. And I feel like it would have been better if I had kept it to myself, because I hadn't read Surrendered Wife at the time, and I was like, oh, maybe I should have, but by that time, like, cat was out of the bag. So moving onward. And it was, so we had done, like, first round of PI, like, amazing fireworks, I'm so excited. And then the second time around, that was like a week later, we're going through, and things are starting to get a little shaky, and I can tell he's kind of feeling very nervous and very much in his head, like, is this, working, and all this other stuff. And I I paused. I think we both paused, and he was sitting there, like, just ready to apologize, and just because the dance used to be like, he would pause, and I would be up in arms. So Yeah.
So this is the part in the dance where you get up in
Yes.
arms. That's where
Yes,
we're at.
exactly. Where I'm supposed to be. And I was like, okay, no, wait, we're going to try this new thing, this spouse fulfilling prophecy. I just read it. I was like, let's give it a try. So I like paused him and I put my hands on either side of his head and I was like, I'm going to try something from that book. And you could just see him like bracing for what I like, was I going to punch him or something? Like he was just ready for me to do something terrible.
Oh, he looked a little terrified, did he?
He did. And I was like,
Oh.
we're going to try this out. And he was like, okay, okay. And I looked him in the eyes and I said, it's not like you to worry about sex. This isn't like you. And just the relief that came over him and just this amazing transformation in that moment. Like he looked like just so happy. And he was like, really? It's not like me? I said, nope, not like you at
What a delicious moment.
all.
He was so happy.
So happy and just couldn't believe it. And we finished that session wonderfully. It went so great after that. Just he was so bolstered by it and I was ecstatic.
Unbelievable. Okay, let's break this down just a little bit because this is powerful, right? So,
Yeah.
and this felt like a bold-faced lie to you. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am just like untethered to reality here. I'm going to say this wacky
Yeah.
thing. What the heck? What have I got to lose? Right? An
Yeah.
experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but you got a great result.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So was that something you started repeating to him? And
Yes. Yeah, so I would say that, and I had prepared that one because after reading it, I was like, well, this could be a good spot to use it. Yeah, in the
yeah.
bedroom. I
Okay.
was
Yes.
like, okay.
You walked in with a game plan.
I did,
This
I
is
did.
important. Okay.
Yes,
Good.
yes.
Good.
So I was like, hey, if this happens again, we'll give it a try this way.
Right. Because there's no way you're coming up with that in that moment. When
No, not in the
you're like, I
moment.
already know the steps to this dance. Okay.
Yes,
That's good. So you
yeah.
got a game plan.
And I
Okay.
am really fortunate that I'd read that chapter, that section very recently, because otherwise we would have been right in the same spot. Like, how is this not working again?
Yeah.
Like we had just had
See?
a great experience.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Told you.
Yes, right.
I was right
Thanks,
again.
Laura
Yeah.
Doyle.
Yeah. I win. All right, but I lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah. And so yeah, so I'd come up with that and it was like, here's the game plan we're gonna try. And what I expected him to do was laugh in my face. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the only thing you complain about. This is what we hear all the time. Like, how could you say this to me? And it didn't go that way. And when it didn't go that way, I thought, what is this book? What is this? This
Magic
is
spell book.
yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was telling my best friend as I was stomping around, like, why don't they tell us this? I said, this book is just witchcraft. I don't understand how she does it. It works. I don't know why, but it does.
Wow. I mean, and you must have felt so elated yourself, accomplished.
Yeah.
Is
Oh
that the right
yeah.
word to like a big accomplishment to like finally solve this problem that you've had for
Yes. Yes. And so then I modified it a little bit as we went along and I would say like, oh, we have great sex and you're, things like that. And it's been great. And I can tell and like when he gets a little off track and when we start to have issues, he'll say it too, like, we have great sex. And I said, yeah, we do. We do have great sex.
he says it right back to you.
Yes.
And it sounds like it's true now for
Mhm.
the most part
Yeah.
at least.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, no marriage is perfect, right? But
No,
so
but
what's it like? Tell us about what it's like.
oh, the whole marriage right now?
Well, let's
Or
start with the bedroom because
okay.
I love this, right? This is such an important part of marriage. We don't always get to
Yeah.
talk about it. You've been great about that. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
So what's it like in the bedroom for you now?
It's so good and it's so fulfilling in a way that I didn't ever expect it to be. And that was even coming in with really high hopes of, because I had big fantasies about what I knew what I liked in the bedroom. I am very particular in this sense. And I was like, yeah, these are all the things I want, and it should go like this. And 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 I was always, especially when we were first dating, um I was always dogging him for it. Like, well, how about now? How about now? And he was like, no, no, no. And or like we didn't, I felt like we didn't have the same drive. And now we're here, and it's so evenly matched, where we just kind of look at each other, and it's like, and I can feel it happens, especially when I let my guard, like I have to lower my walls first to
That
do it. And
vulnerability.
yes, and
Ah,
it's the only way that it works in the best sense, because I can like muscle my way through, but why would I do that when I could have this amazing experience? So like if I lower my walls and I look at him, like he will look right back and will know that this is, things are about to happen and we're going to have an amazing time. And it's gotten to a point where I'm so what do I want? Sated,
Sated, sure. Satiated. It could be
satiated,
sated or
sated,
satiated. Anyway, that thing.
that like I'm
Fulfilled.
just so
Yeah.
fulfilled. And I don't, because I would just seek out like all these fantasies, and just like, here are all the things I want. And I would go looking for things. I'd spend time online and just like, I wonder what else is out there and everything else. And now it just not even, nothing's interesting except what I'm doing with my husband in the bedroom. Nothing compares. It's just so fulfilling. I love it. I love it.
Wow. So, and inside of this, I hear you feeling desired.
Very. Yeah.
Oh, it's steamy and it's hot. Okay. I
Yes.
mean, it's better than anything you find online. That's pretty
Yes.
good, right? That's a
Yeah.
big world of. Okay.
Yes.
Well, congratulations. That is a huge accomplishment, right? What a win. You like to win.
Yeah. I do. I
You
do.
are winning.
Yes. Huge
PI,
win.
this physical intimacy stuff. Okay. So, all right. So now let's hear about the rest of the marriage too. What's the
Mm.
rest of your marriage like?
Just incredible. I really do live a fairy tale now, and I'm so lucky. I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful that he didn't leave, that and he could have taken the bait and said, "Fine, I'm done." And I'm so grateful that he didn't, because it's fun. It's back to the fun that we have. We have a little stuffed animal that we just love to, will hide, just like your Quaker oat man,
Okay.
and just and it's just fun. And he he looks after me in ways that are just, he will always make me breakfast. He always makes sure I have breakfast one way or the other. He does all the laundry, he does all the yard work, he does all the dishes. I want for nothing. And it just, I man, I can't say how thankful I am enough. Like, it's just amazing. And so many good examples. But like Christmas time came, and I was eyeing these two rings. I couldn't decide like which style to get. And I was going to buy it for myself, and I'm sitting there, and he's looking over my shoulder like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I just can't decide on these rings. Not sure if it's worth it. It's money." And because earlier I had mentioned like, "Oh, I like fine jewelry. Like, I love fine jewelry. That's my thing." And he goes like, "Well, I did promise you fine jewelry." And I was like, "Oh, really?" So he was like, "Go ahead. And if you want," because I really couldn't decide. He was like, "Do you want to get both?" And I said, "Yes, I do."
Because you're such a good receiver now.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. And it's
So
just,
you mean to tell me you got both of those
I
rings? That
did.
isn't that just over the top? Isn't that
Yes.
indulgent?
Yes.
And and
Oh.
didn't it strengthen your marriage to
It
get
was,
them
I
both?
mean, yes. And I love wearing them around. I love just like walking my hand past, like, oh, look at
Oh,
how
yeah,
cute this
wait, you
ring
just
is.
flashed them. I want to
Look
see.
at
I
this.
want to
Oh,
see.
these
Okay,
aren't
yeah.
they're not
Those aren't them.
waterfalls.
Okay, but I do see you have some fine
Yes.
jewelry
Oh,
on.
yeah.
So
And
yes, that's
I
your
think
thing.
all of them are courtesy of him too. So he's just,
Oh, okay. So those are
yeah.
okay. Wow. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So this is life at Lorelai's house. It's just you
Yeah.
get both the yard
Yes.
work and the dishes and the laundry
Yes.
and both rings.
Yes.
Yeah. And it feels
Yeah.
like a fairy tale. So
Yeah.
I love it. And this
Mm.
is from and you gave him 3 months
Mm-hmm.
to a divorce. You really
Yeah.
were right there at divorce's door.
Oh, absolutely. I was, and I was just thinking, like, I don't know who I called to get a divorce lawyer. And here I am now. And now we're planning out our 10-year anniversary. And I didn't think it would happen. I really, and I was bummed about it, thinking like, oh, it's a bummer we couldn't make it to 10, but this marriage is in the dumps. There's no way to save it. And now,
Yeah,
yeah,
it can't be
that's
done.
can't be done.
So what would you tell yourself now if you could go back and say what you know
Oh,
now?
the biggest thing I would say to myself is Lorelai, I need you to stop focusing on what's fair, because that kept me from really diving all the way into the books, because I had this thing, and I think a lot of people have mentioned it, of like, well, why do I have
I
to
have to
work
do
on, yeah,
why?
yeah.
Why?
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's only human to think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It was exactly that. And I thought, like, this, and then like I said, mathematician. So I did a lot of analyzing of everything and over analyzing it. So in math, you're trained to look for the extremes. Like, that's your goal, is how does it work in the extreme cases? So I would go through the advice and be like, well, it might work for me, but what about somebody else in this very extreme case? And I really had to bring myself back. Like, you're not fixing their marriage, you're working on yours. So your marriage looks like this. You need to look here.
You're like, but what if she's wrong? Right.
Yes,
That was like, that
what
was,
if he's doing the, yeah, all of this?
yeah.
And it's just like, that's not your focus. You really need to focus on you and the empowerment. I couldn't believe that doing all of this would empower me the way that it has. Because for me, empowerment was a totally different definition. It was somebody who, gets it done, and head of the household and dot dot dot. And instead, being empowered like this is having such control over my emotions, and just knowing exactly who I am and what I want. And it's a level of empowerment that just feels amazing. And I would just tell Lorelai, like, don't worry about the extremes, worry about you, focus on what you want, and stop worrying about what, if it's going to be fair or not, because at the end, it's are you happy? And I am extremely happy.
Wow. That is awesome.
Yeah.
And it just sounds like you've changed a lot. You
Mm.
are, how have you changed?
The biggest one is gratitude and rage. And even with my relationships with my friends, and the example I'll give is we had just moved into our house, and my best friend, she had offered to hang up. We have all these paintings, and she'd offered to hang them up. And this is pre Laura Doyle. So, she'd done all this time. They're all even, wonderfully spaced. And she gets done. And I was like, did you hang them up with just the nails, or did you use the special hooks? And she's like, oh, I just did the nails. And instead of saying, oh, okay, great, like, thanks, I said, you're dead to me, because she hadn't hung them up properly.
That's right.
Yes,
She did it
yeah.
wrong.
She did
Yeah.
it wrong.
It would have
And
to be all redone. Yeah.
obviously,
It's a total
otherwise,
disaster.
yeah,
Yeah.
the wall's gonna cave in, and
Yeah.
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 But good news is, all the paintings are still standing. They look amazing. So it's
Too
just,
bad she's dead to you.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a bummer that she had to die like that, but
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
but yeah, there's a level of gratitude to me that I did not have, and things like that, because that gratitude requires that vulnerability to say, thank you, I really needed your help, and I didn't have that before. And the other one is just the rage, just being able to stop fights, and my husband and we have not had a single fight. I will say, nothing.
Wait, and how long? And how long?
Let's see. So this should be six months, I think. And we just everything's so easy. I just say, and I look down and say, like, well, what am I actually feeling here? And I express that. And he says, like, okay. And I've said my piece, and he apologizes and I apologize, and then we're on our way. And it's the smoothest thing. And this being able to apologize, this letting go of this rage is such a big change. And it's so I'm so gratified to have it. Like, it's just amazing.
It is amazing, isn't it? To
Yeah.
cure rage.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say you're a
Yes.
rageaholic?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not.
No.
No.
No. Yeah.
Incredible, right? That's
Yeah.
your anger management program right there, right?
Yes. The low cost of empowered wife. I'm all raged out. There's nothing left.
yeah. All this with a book. Wait, so you
Yeah.
did all this with a book? Just the book, or you?
I did the book for the majority of it, and then I just kept joining things at the wrong time. I had first put in to be a part of Ridiculously Happy Wives, and then it was like right around that, like the high end of the 3 months. So then I got the invitation, and I was like, oh, I'm fine. Then of course I hit the 3 months. I'm like, oh shoot, should have joined that. And then I put in again, because then I was at the low point, and I was like, okay, let's try this Happy Wives thing. And of course, like right as I got the invitation, that's when I hit the vulnerability and had the meditation, and I was like, oh, I feel so good. But I joined anyways because I thought I would like to see it all the same. So I joined for 1 month, and I was really glad I did. It was the group coaching calls were so interesting, and I saw so many good things. And it really helped to kind of fine tune my understanding of the skills. So I was really happy to have joined it, even though it was only a month, and then I stepped out. But it was I love the group coaching. I would have done those forever, just to have them, to just sit and witness everybody else's and see everyone's breakthroughs, and so supportive, and it was wonderful.
And what is your tip for somebody who is where you were, where the bedroom is just feeling like a unmitigated disaster that they can never recover from? And she is feeling like it's so hopeless. She wants to get divorced. How can she get what you have now, where it's just fireworks all the time, and you get both rings, and he does the dishes and the laundry and the yard work?
Yeah.
Makes her breakfast.
Yes, every day. I would say first buy the book and read that in full, and do the homework, because it's really easy to skip over and say, like, I'll make the list later. But absolutely do the exercises, and just try. And then really have some patience, because especially if it's physical intimacy, that one took a while, because there were a lot of hurts that had to be healed, both on my end and his end, and just really have a lot of patience, which is hard. I don't have patience to this day, but yeah. So it was hard to have that, but really do, and be very open to that vulnerability, to really seeing if you are able to run through that waterfall of fear. Just give yourself that opportunity, and amazing things are on the other side.
I love it. Well, I know you've done all this for my approval mostly.
Yes,
So
yes.
I'd like to give you this wife award here.
Yes,
Congratulations.
you. Finally.
You win, Lorelai. You win.
Yes.
I
completed my
approve. No,
goals.
I'm seriously so impressed, and just have so much admiration for this journey that you went through, and the transformation that you've come out with. Super inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing it all with us. It was really beautiful.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate being on here.
If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes. And now it's time for the worst relationship advice of the week Award.
It's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice. Yeah, it's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice of the week.
And the advice that has me fuming this week was sent to me by a coach training student who writes, I've seen lots of bad relationship advice on the internet, but this article called 10 Signs You're Not in Love with Your Partner, You Just Wish You Were, gives 10 examples of the worst relationship advice. She also says, now that I'm a student of the intimacy skills, I cannot believe how many horrible articles there are on the internet like this one. It's so sad to think that people read this garbage and decide their marriage is over because of this abhorrent advice. She goes on to say, your books, podcast, and community have saved my marriage. I'm very thankful to you and your program for making this possible. And you know what? She nailed it. This article is a perfect 10 of rotten advice. So here's my anonymous shout out to you for sending me this treasure trove of trash, which I can't wait to jump on like a cat on a laser pointer. I feel the love, and it's coming right back at you. Thank you. The first headline in this article says, sometimes the love just dies, which right there, it made me spit my tea out. It's neither uplifting nor helpful, and there are 9 more like it. So to minimize potential brain damage, I only skimmed the rest of the article, and then I started fuming about the very first one because this is reinforcing the mythology that can make marriage feel so hard. This idea that love is just mercurial, like wind that might blow on you and then stop, and you have no control over it. To love is actually a verb, an action word, like exercise. So if you were going through a time when you didn't exercise for a while, you wouldn't say, sometimes exercise just dies. You would know that you just haven't been sweating lately because you just decided not to, right? Or maybe you were sick or you were injured, but you'd know that exercise didn't die. It will always be there waiting for you if you want to do it. Same with love. You can always choose it. It's always there waiting for you if you want to experience it. And I don't mean you have to be all saintly like Mother Teresa, smiling at everyone, even though you're not getting what you need forever. No way. But I have had the experience of having to let go of my misery. And the best way I know to do that is to drop and do 10, meaning making a list of 10 gratitudes. You might make a gratitude list of things you appreciate about your husband. I remember one student who did that, even though she was so fed up with her loser husband and she didn't think there was anything to be grateful for about him. But she decided to just do the list and read it every day for 2 weeks and even add to it a little every day. And at the end of the 2 weeks, she told me what a great husband he was and that she was so happy he forgives because she hadn't been the best wife. Same guy. And just like Dorothy, she had the power all along. And she figured out how to use it, and the love came back. So I get pretty mad when articles like this one imply that love is out of your control and you just have to wait for it to land on you like a UFO, or that love just moves on unexpectedly. In my experience, love is created when I choose my focus wisely, including what I love or what I'm grateful for, even if it feels like a big stretch or it feels like a sacrifice to stop focusing on my resentments. Feeling resentful is not that much fun. And deciding to be grateful is a great cure for that because you can't be grateful and resentful at the same time. It's one or the other. And for those reasons, the advice that sometimes love just dies is the very, very, very worst relationship advice I've heard. all week. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week, I'll share 2 ways to make a rageaholic respectful. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that I got an electric bike. You don't even have to pedal. I use it to burn calories.